For over 70 years, humanity has been fighting an invisible biological war against a terrifying parasite. And as I'm recording this, we may have just lost it. It's a real-world horror show straight out of a zombie movie. This parasite not only eats human and animal flesh, but it lays its eggs inside wounds, turning a person or animal host into a breeding ground for thousands of these little flesh monsters. Screwworm flies. That's what they're called. They're an incredibly aggressive species of parasitic fly. And while they don't attack healthy individuals, if you have a cut or wound, then you're screwed. Because that's where they lay their eggs. In a matter of hours, those eggs will hatch into tiny worm-like parasites with a big appetite. These screwworms, also known as botflies, would feast on your living flesh. Thousands of them wriggling around inside you, sucking up all of your blood and leaving their droppings behind. Infected people are often bedridden, weak, and in agonizing pain. And although the condition can be treated with surgery, the more difficult challenge is stopping the cycle of infection. If a female screwworm finds a suitable host, she lays between 100 and 500 eggs before flying off to find another victim. A day later, her offspring hatch and immediately set about the gruesome task of finding blood vessels to feed off. Their preferred hosts are cattle and other large mammals. But humans aren't safe either. During the Second World War, there were so many reported cases of screwworm infections among U.S. soldiers that the infestation became known as the jungle rot of the Pacific Theater. At least 12,000 service members were infected during the war, many blinded by maggots that crawled into their eyes. When they're done feeding, the screwworms leave the host to pupate in nearby vegetation. There, they spend a few weeks growing before emerging as adult flies ready to start the process over again. For livestock owners, screwworms are a nightmare. Not only do they make animals sick, but the larvae can grow to be several inches long, eventually killing the host outright. Between 1923 and 1968, screwworms caused an estimated $1 billion worth of damage to ranches in the United States, much of it in Texas. The economic impact was enough to spur a radical solution. Scientists began to plan an eradication campaign that would rely on one of the most bizarre weapons ever deployed in the history of warfare. The initial strategy was simple. Kill all of the adult screwworms that can be reached with pesticide. Simultaneously, sterilize as many of them as possible by radiation. In order to develop this technology, scientists irradiated a bunch of screwworm pupae, the inactive stage of a fly's life cycle that comes before it emerges as an adult. To their surprise, they found that lower doses of radiation could sterilize the males without harming their ability to mate. The females, however, required higher doses of radiation, which also shortened their lifespan. This wasn't a problem since the males are the ones that need to be. With the process perfected, all that was left to do was to mass-produce the irradiated flies and release them into the environment. But first, scientists needed a way to separate the males from the females. Since screwworms usually emerge from their pupal case in mixed groups, the males and females together, they developed a device called a sex-attracting trap. As the name suggests, it uses the fact that female screwworms release a pheromone to attract mates. This pheromone was synthesized and placed inside a trap, along with a sticky substance that would hold the flies in place once they flew in. Male screwworms would enter the trap to find a mate, but they never got the chance to come back out again. When scientists had trapped enough males, they would collect them, irradiate them, and then release them back into the environment. In 1954, the U.S. government initiated the Screwworm Eradication Program. Sterilized males were released in Florida and Texas in an attempt to stop the spread of But this was only the beginning. Over the next decade, the program grew, expanding into Mexico and Central America, with screwworm eradication efforts eventually reaching all the way down to Panama. By 1966, just 2 years after the last wild screwworm was collected in the Western Hemisphere, the United States declared victory over the parasite. It was the first country in the world to eradicate screwworms using this method. At its peak, the Screwworm Eradication Program produced 200 million sterile flies each week. plus countless traps to catch the male. All told, the effort cost the U.S. government $100 million, or the equivalent of nearly $700 million today. But the war wasn't over yet. While screwworms had been completely wiped out in the United States, they still remained a threat elsewhere. Eradicating the parasite from Central America proved to be more challenging. The region's dense jungles made trapping screwworms nearly impossible, and outbreaks continued for decades. But slowly but surely, the numbers came down. By 2000, there were fewer than 1,000 screwworm cases reported in all of Latin America. Just a few years later, the region was declared screwworm-free. It seemed like the war was finally over. We had one, but it wasn't, because while screwworms had been driven out of the Western Hemisphere, they never went away entirely. In fact, screwworms are still a major problem in Africa and Asia. And it turns out the parasite has a really nasty trick for getting around. Screwworms can remain dormant in their poopery stage for up to 10 years. Just a small number of them are required to kick off an outbreak. Then it's just a matter of time until they become a massive infestation again. That's exactly what happened in 2016. After more than 50 years without a case, screwworms were detected in 4 Florida counties. Less than 2 years later, the parasite had spread to every county in the contiguous United States. And in 2023, the USDA announced screwworm infestations in 6 more states, including California and New Mexico. The parasite is now back in the southwestern part of the country where it all began. This resurgence is made all the more dire by the fact that screwworms have evolved resistance to the chemical warfare used to fight them. It means that the only weapon effective at combating the parasite is the sterile insect technique. But even this is proving to be more challenging than it was in the mid-20th century. Back then, the U.S. produced its own screwworm flies for the eradication program, but those facilities have since shut down. Now the country relies on a single factory in Panama to produce the massive quantities of flies necessary to keep the parasite under control. It's a great facility. It can make 100 million flies every week, but it isn't enough to contain the current infestation. Even though the facility was producing at full capacity, it still took months for the flies to reach parts of the U.S. where they could be released. And by then, the screwworms had already spread. By the time the sterile flies reached the worst affected areas, it was too late. It's a daunting situation, but scientists they're doing everything they can to get the parasite under control. It's not easy work. Fly factories, traps, and radiation aren't exactly glamorous tools of modern warfare. Instead, much of the work takes place in labs and outposts deep in the jungle. But it's no less important for that. Every week, 100 million sterile flies are shipped out of Panama, flown to their destinations via small plane. A single C-130 can carry 25 million flies in one go. When they arrive, the flies are unloaded and released. Once they mate with but since the males have been sterilized, none of the eggs will hatch. Within a few weeks, the screwworm population should begin to collapse. It's a painstakingly slow process that scientists have to repeat constantly. The good news is, it seems to be working. Cases of screwworms in Texas have already begun to fall, and the USDA believes the infestation will be over by early 2024. But this doesn't mean the war is over. Even when the current outbreak is contained, it will happen again. Screwworms have been a constant threat to livestock for over 100 years. And they'll continue to be a problem for years to come. The U.S. is currently locked in a race against time. While scientists buy more time to develop new and better ways to fight screwworms, the question is, how? Do you think we'll be able to stop it? Or will this parasite devour us all? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe for more stories of scientific warfare. Thank you for watching.